thing live. Are we live? What is everybody? Hope everybody's having a fantastic start to your week. Slash is already checking in early, saying, what's up, B? What's up, Slash? So doing a bit of an open chat this time around. Been wearing this EV thing out a little bit. It's been actually a little bit more entertaining for me than I really should admit. I'm also coming on a little bit on the early side tonight, mainly because, you know, it's a school night, right? Anyway, doing a bit of an open chat, kind of an old school chat. So if you've got questions about camshafts, tuning, intake manifold choices, builds, things like that, probably a good chance to get some of the more common questions asked. Also, kind of an invite for new guys to come in, ask about, you know, what parts work, what parts I've tested, you know, which parts have worked and fit well, you know, best value, stuff like that. So if you got any questions like that, would be kind of fun to jump in the middle of those too. So basically just doing kind of an old school Mopar chat on this one. Check in with you guys and see what's going on. Slash already checked in with him. Cleaver saying, B, what's up, man? John Jones in saying, what up, B? Got the arm flex. I like it. Cleaver saying, what's up? Hag saying, hey, Ryan's got the OKs out there. Marco's checking in 5.7 Hemi with cam and headers or 6.4 stock. Damn it. Okay, so I'm going to make this one real quick because I can literally, I've put on like multiple hour shows on this one topic. If you already have a 5.7 or you've been willed a 5.7 or somebody just basically plopped a 5.7 right in your lap, they are a riot with a cam and gears and a tune and long tubes and all of that. However, if you have the prospect of being able to get your hands on a 6.4, the 6.4 will give pretty much that 5.7, that same cammed 5.7, all that it can handle bone stock. So I'm a big fan of the 5.7s. I love a cammed 5.7. Man, I just don't have enough good things to say about it. If it's done right, especially with the trucks, with some of the converters that are out there that seem to work well with the trucks at that power level. I haven't really heard of anybody just falling in love with a converter with a 6.4 just yet. There's some tuning issues, I think, that surround that. But the 5.7s with the lower power actually tend to take to those a little bit better. So there's some options there. But I will warn you, you decide you want to throw a King's Ransom at a 5.7, just remember that your resale option is going to be significantly more impaired than a 6.4. So you got to take that into consideration. But if you're going to line the two up against each other, man, I would be hard pressed to choose against the 6.4. I'm just a huge fan of that platform, but a cammed 5.7, it's awfully close and you can have a damn hell of a lot of fun with that car. And again, if you got it really cheap, you can have just as much fun and have a car that's every bit as fast, depending on the cam, maybe a little bit faster on the highway than a 6.4, and it won't break the bank. Brent saying, what's up, y'all? Cinnamon saying, yo, B, what's up, Sin? Cubby saying, sup, B? My drag strip is operating full time now. Time to get into the 10s. I like it. Summer Night saying, sup, B Mason, how's your evening going? It's going good, Summer. Thanks for asking. So like I said, I really think my way to go for the Scat Pack is to do the 426. I'm seeing too many companies not wanting to warranty anything larger than that from the 6.4 block. Well, quite honestly, you won't see a whole lot of folks warranting if you really want to use the term. I mean, that's kind of a, it's kind of a loose term really nowadays, warranty, right? I know that Arrington stands behind their stuff. So if I were to ever do a stroker, I would definitely do I would definitely give Arrington a look. I know I've only had one issue or heard of one issue with an Arrington block coming in as a low compression block as opposed to a high compression block. But that being said, Arrington does a great job of putting those things together. 426 is good. I'm not really a warning. How do I put this? I'm just going to give you a quick heads up. Don't necessarily expect the world to fall at your feet just because you put a 426 in the thing. 392 versus 426, there's not a big delta, you know, displacement wise. Most of the 426s that I've seen reliably versus a relatively well put together 392 are going to be about 30 to 40 horsepower better than the 392. Now, you've got to ask yourself, oh, and torque is going to fall in about the same, maybe 40 pound-feet of torque at the most, okay? So, and that's on a Mustang dyno. That's also, by the way, with a Edelbrock Victor intake on both of those 426s. One of them had my cam. Actually, two of them had my cam, not including the Hellcats. These are the NA cars. I'll say this: the 426 is a cool setup. Just don't expect it to be mind-blowingly different in terms of fast. That's the main thing. Let's see. Slash is asking, what brand of forged internals would you think would be the best for 1,000+ horsepower? Molnar. Molnar rods, Eagle, Molnar pistons, something along those lines, stock crank. That's the route that I would go. MMX actually sells a pretty good rotating assembly. Do the 10 over, forged internal kit, take the block to a machine shop, have it bored 10 over, and get a really good ring seal. The main thing, though, you're talking about 1,000 horsepower, right? Well, Hellcat block, there's also that too if you decided to go that route and you're going forced induction with a positive displacement supercharger. However, I will say that there is no such thing as a horsepower number that engine will be able to manage if your ring gap isn't right, if the tune isn't right. There's a lot of things that you're going to have to look at outside of the block to make sure that the block isn't compromised. And by the block, I mean the rotating assembly. But ring gap needs to be taken into account. Realistically, even the NA stuff, I would still say, 6 thousandths per inch of bore is what you're going to be looking at. So a minimum, realistically, of 24 thousandths on the top ring, maybe 25, 28 thousandths on the second ring, would be about what I'll be looking at. At least 25 and 25, if nothing else. Obviously, you don't gap your oil ring, but that would be my first and primary bit of advice. I mean, all of the aftermarket stuff is pretty good. You're really not going to go wrong with a commercially available rotating assembly. Just make sure that when, and again, you say best, right? So best is only best until better shows up to the party. But you can make the best better when you take this stuff to the machine shop. Okay, so for you guys that might be new to the channel, every once in a while you'll hear something buzz by. It's going to sound loud or fast or whatever. Where the shop is fairly close to where Velocito is, and so you'll hear. It's a beautiful night. This will be one of the last really pretty nights of this week. So there might be some guys going out to make some test hits. We've got Texas 2K coming up, and so there have been. And when I say some heavy hitters out here testing, we've had a little bit of everybody. We've had Supras, GTRs, Vets. We've had some pretty nasty Vipers out here. Some of the LS trucks have been out here. A few Hellcats running around, but for the most part, Velocito is up and running, baby. Anyway, getting back to it. Oh, sorry, I don't want to belay the point, squirrel. But guys, no, seriously. The main thing is just to make sure that the setup is correct. Make sure that you balance this thing. It's the point that I was getting to. Make sure the machine shop balances the entire assembly when they do the assembly. You're going to take your lightest rod and you're going to basically weight everything to your lightest rod, weight everything to your lightest piston. And then when it's on the balancer, then they'll use the heavy metal in the balances to get the thing balanced. So hopefully that helps you. But mainly it has a whole lot more to do with the prep than it has to do with the parts in many cases. Because I can tell you, yeah, here's a great set of parts, but if you just throw it in the block, you're screwing up. By the way, that same advice goes for cylinder heads. Never, ever, never, ever, ever take a set of cylinder heads right out of the box and put them on your car. Find you a good head guy, have the heads gone through, make sure that everything is prepped and set with your heads before you just throw them on the car. I've seen way too many cylinder heads come out of a box, go onto a car, and have issues with leak down tests or the springs are shitty, the valves are shitty or whatever, you always need to have a guy go through the heads. Sean Hooper at Hooper's Heads, awesome guy, salt of the earth. He's an instructor over at SAM, can put you where you need to be. But springs are super important. Everything's important when it comes to that. Anyway, Chris is asking, how much horsepower could my 6.1 with 35,000 miles on it with a stock bottom end? Well, I've seen stock engines blow up, Chris. So, I mean, if you're asking what you can get away with, man, you can get away with 7 or 8 pounds of boost on a well-tuned forced induction type, whether it's positive displacement, centrifugal, it doesn't matter, turbos even. You'll be okay in that like half atmosphere. In other words, roughly 7 psi, 8 psi at the most range. They'll all basically take that, but it won't be optimized for that power level, obviously, because you've got to take into account ring gap and fuel quality and things like that. So, you know, I would say, you know, the normal number. I would say the normal number of, you know, 550 to the rear wheels is a pretty common number most guys will get to. And, you know, that'll be kind of the walking around number that's safe, okay with you know, stock driveline components typically, and it will be able to manage fuel quality issues as well with a good street tune. Kobe's asking, I want a trans tune. Can I do a trans tune and keep the engine warranty? Unfortunately not, Kobe, because the 1405 code will be thrown no matter what. I mean, you have to unlock the ECU to get to the TCM anyway, and to be honest with you, it won't do you a whole lot of good to tune the transmission without tuning some of the parameters on the on the engine side, on the ECU side. Sovereign's asking, are the 5.7s able to handle boost with the stock internals? If so, how much is safe on a stock internals? Kind of the same thing I was just talking about before. You know, I would say somewhere in the neighborhood of, you know, 7 to 8 pounds of boost is typically pretty, God, these glasses are driving me nuts. It's typically pretty doable, provided that, again, the tune is on point, you've got solid fuel quality and things like that. Those are the things that can kind of throw you off a little bit with that. Marco's got the high five. What's up, man? Sam's checking in, saying what's up. Ryan saying, I'm wondering if I could find a tire that would fit a 20-inch and would be able to hook up, or if I need to go 17 or 18-inch rim. I'm running an estimated 460 horsepower. Well, yeah, I mean, if that's 460 to the wheels, that shouldn't be a problem with the set of really any of the available drag radials. I mean, even the Tri-5 R2 dead hooked with my Hellcat on a fairly well-prepped track. But that's the main thing that you're talking about, those. It's got to be a very well-prepped track for some of those tires to hook up. But at that power level, no, you should be pretty good. You know, the Mickey Thompson ET Street SS is a good tire. Obviously, the Nittos that I just mentioned are good as well at that power level. Now, if we're talking about on the street, don't really expect them to hook up that well because it's the street. There's a lot of things you can't control on the street, and you don't have any track prep either. Sam saying, I think a Cam 5.7 Charger 300 would be fun. Absolutely they are. Arthur saying, good evening, B Mesa. Got the arm flex and the bald guy wearing shades. I like it. Ryan saying, if I needed a 17 or 18-inch wheels, would I be able to use that for a daily? Yeah, as a matter of fact, my buddy Chris with Orange Crush dailies his Bravada setup, which are 18 rear, 20 fronts. And the car looks great. Runs that thing all over the place. So yes, absolutely, you can daily that. Chris asking, why is it that I have to upgrade both injectors and fuel pump in my 6.1 to run E85? So the main reason why is because of fuel mass. It takes 30 to 35% more fuel mass to get the same amount of energy, if you will, out of E85 as it does for gasoline. So, in other words, to make 100 horsepower, if it takes, you know, 100 units of gasoline, it will take 130 units of E85 to make the same 100 horsepower. So you have to have injectors that will manage that type of flow, and you have to have a fuel pump along with fuel injectors that will also be able to sustain a fuel system running ethanol. Ethanol is pretty brutal on fuel parts, components. And so you need fuel pump that is not only going to be able to flow more, but will also be able to manage and handle that ethanol. So that's the reason why. Sovereign saying, oh, 7.0 versus 6.4. Yeah, talking about the size difference between the two. Marco saying, do you have Instagram? You know, I do, but I really don't do anything with it. There's a few folks that'll message me every once in a while, but the problem with my Instagram is I ended up having folks messaging me in the middle of the night for stuff and wake me up. And so I basically just quit messing around with Instagram too much. Do everything on the channel now. Chris is saying, hey, B, what's your thoughts on the C0706? One of my favorite cars to drive. Thinking of getting one in stick. Again, very good car. Let's see. Once the prices drop a bit, too much for a first sports car. I'm 23. So I will put it to you like this. The C6 or C706 reminds me a lot. And I mean, it was really kind of a weird experience, but it is identical to the way that my heads cam 99 ACR Viper drove. When I drove the C706, I felt like I was transported, except in the Vet, it's a hell of a lot more comfortable to drive. Not to mention just a better car all the way around. So if you're thinking about getting one, I will tell you right now that it is worth the wait. Save up your money, make sure you got a place to keep the car. But yeah, it's a really good car to drive. And again, one of my all-time favorite cars to drive. 392 Smoke saying, what's happening, B? Got the arm flex. I like it. Saying, which one of your cams will get a 6.4 to 500 wheel horsepower, and how do your cams match up to an MMX Max Effort cam that is getting 500 wheel horsepower? So my Sniper cam will put you just at, depending on the dyno, because each dyno reads a little bit different, but it'll put you just at 500 rear wheel horsepower. And it's the least aggressive of the 6.4 cams. It's the cam that I developed for me. Doesn't really have a lope at all and makes power everywhere. If you saw Quick Bricks, the white Charger that is it's Racer X's buddy, Quick Brick, that car has basically got that cam in it. And now granted, it's an E85 car with long tubes, one of my intakes, 84 millimeter throttle body. I will tell you that the E85 didn't do that car any favors in terms of making horsepower, although it did help it make a little bit of torque and obviously made tuning it a little bit easier. But long story short, that's a really good cam. I really wouldn't worry about the number of 500 as much as I'll tell you that that car practically, I cannot believe that car didn't pull the front tires off the ground. In fact, that car at 4,550 pounds or 4,650 pounds with a driver launched for the first 30 feet harder than my Hellcat when I drove that car. I mean, it's just bam, and I mean, just kicks you in the back of the head. It's a really fun car to drive. There's the Warlock grind, which is designed to make more power than the Sniper, but it's not by a whole lot, because you got to remember, man, the big problem with putting a cam together for the Mopars is there's two, but the big issue is just the barge factor of these Mopars. They all weigh over 4,300 pounds. And when you're trying to get 43, 44, 4,500 pounds or more in this cam, that is, by the way, that Charger at 4,550 or 4,600 pounds, the heaviest car that cam has ever gone in. That car, when I drove it, went 1130s at 121 or 120 miles an hour. When the DA kind of came up a little bit, believe it or not, and Rob had just a gorgeous launch with it, that barge went 1129 at 120 or 121 miles an hour. So the cam puts in work. It's really strong out of the hole. It just makes power all over the place. So I guess getting back to it, one of the problems with trying to put a cam together for one of these things is that you can't put a cam together for one of these cars, whether it's when I say one of these cars, I'm talking about all of them. Durango, the Cherokee, the Charger, the Challenger, they're all super heavy. You cannot put a cam in there that's going to favor the far right-hand side of the chart. In other words, make more horsepower without, you just can't sacrifice the torque is what I'm trying to get. I'm literally getting ahead of myself in my head to say you don't want to sacrifice torque with these things. It's not an LS. I would say that cleaning up the intake and putting an 84 millimeter throttle body on the car will certainly help. I can tell you that the data on that cam with that setup is really nice. It is within, if you guys are into the data on intake manifolds, it's within ½ an inch of mercury all the way across the pull with a 0 delta at some points. So you're literally at vacuum, at atmospheric in some areas with that cam. So it really does fit the bill in terms of the best compromise, I think, for that engine. The Warlock is a little bit different. It's a little bit more duration. A slightly tighter lobe separation angle, again, to try to get a little bit more torque out of the thing, with a little bit more chop. But that's really, I don't ever put a cam together for a sound. It's just, I'm looking at the specifications for the type of power that I'm looking to have the thing make and where I want it to make power. And then from there, you have the high roller. So the high roller would be my max effort cam. And this is a Dr. Differential program that I put together. That car is apparently fast as hell that high roller went into. I've never driven it. I've only seen it up close, but I've never personally ridden in it or driven it. But it sounds amazing. It's actually, I put that together to more or less be the 6.4 equivalent to the Joker cam, which is a real popular cam for the 5.7s. It's actually a nitrous grind that I put together for the 5.7s, but the 5.7s just happened to take really well to it, naturally aspirated. But anyway, getting back to it, that would really be about the max effort that I would look at for the street for one of these cars. And I know that car from a roll, which is one of the reasons why it's named what it is, with one of my intakes and one of my throttle bodies, I know the dude's super happy with it. That's all I can tell you. He goes out and roll races this thing and doesn't really get stung that often and is able to hang with cars he ought not be hanging with. And by the way, that tank is heavy too. It's a Challenger, but it's a wide body 6.4. So loaded out, sunroof, active radar thing, the whole bit. So anyway, some good choices there. You know, I've got a few different 6.4 grinds. I know of two that work really well. The only one that really hadn't been tested is the Warlock grind, and I can tell you that it's going to fall somewhere in between the two. You know, again, that's one that I would love to see in a Challenger or something like that. It'd be really nice in a manual Challenger, but so would the high roller. Anyway, it's always easiest to go right to the bottom of the page, right? But anyway, that's kind of how those cams stack up. Dr. Diff's checking in saying, my man, what up? What up, man? Kobe Warren saying, how do you remember where you're at in the live chat? You are very good at coming back to your point in the chat. Amazing, man. Actually, what I'll do typically is on my side of this, I don't even know, I've never watched one after the fact, but on my left-hand side, the comments are coming up. So I'll basically just kind of remember where I was, and then I can flip back and forth from there. So like if somebody throws in a super chat, usually it'll pop up and I can scroll down to the bottom and pick up on them. But typically with stuff like this, it's just keeping up with it. That's it. Dr. Div saying, speaking of porting, I'm still waiting for B Mason to port me a set of heads. I tell you what, yeah, give me those set of heads. I'll run them over I'll run them over to Sean and have him throw them in his CNC machine. He's got a real good program for heads, by the way. Dr. Div's checking in with Sovereign Knight on his truck, which moves out, by the way. Things making about 850 or 900 horsepower. Sovereign Knight saying, Soup's on, keep the stream on, be back in a bit. Cool, man, I like it. Slash saying, I can never hit 7.5 seconds in the 8th mile like Mrs. X. I'm always sitting around 8082-ish. I assume that's because my elevation in Nebraska is 955 feet. That's a big portion of it, for sure. Yeah, and part of it is that, and part of it might be the setup, not to mention she doesn't weigh all that much. And what's funny, though, is that talking about Mrs. X's car, so Racer X and I both drove her car he ran an 1157 with that car. And I got the keys, I drove it, and I went an exact 1157 with that car too. That was some good times. That was really fun. Slash is saying, so you are saying a few videos ago that your new front runners are a lot easier to install than the Dark Stars. Hey, yeah, they're actually sitting right there, as a matter of fact. Yes, they are. So the main reason for that is that they're not shanked lugs. Now, I don't have any, the thing is though, as I say that, I got really good at installing Dark Stars. I mean, I'm not trying to brag or nothing, but I'm just saying. But the main thing is if you're taking them on, putting them off, whatever, if you're on and off, on and off, on and off like that, you just end up tearing up the finish on the wheels. And so, my thought was, well, I need to get another set of wheels for the car and, something that's easier to take off and put on. And really, it was just one of those things where when I'm doing a lot of testing, like I'm going to probably be doing here coming into the spring and summer, I've got a set of rake loose wheels, at least the rears anyway, that I'm going to be taking off and using that for some of the tires that I'll be testing at the drag strip. And I just needed something that was going to be a little bit easier to work with, honestly. Tuxedo Black Cat is checking in. Have you driven my dream car, the Dodge Charger SRT Hellcat? Have I? I've driven a lot of them. They're a lot of fun. What I like about the Hellcat Charger is you don't expect it to be that fast. I mean, when you have something that's two doors and muscle car-y, like the Challenger, one of the things that you'll know, okay, so I will say this, let me just reset. The Charger, from a structural integrity point of view, is better than the Challenger. The Challenger is kind of derivative of that LX platform, but you have to remember that the Challenger is. The Charger is nuts and, I mean, almost down to nuts and bolts, identical to my, I had a 09 E63 AMG, the W211 with the M156 V8, and the car was fast. I mean, I kind of missed that car. But anyway, the point of this is that I had kind of it was an interesting experience because driving the Chargers, you notice how much tighter they are. It's just a way that they feel. They just feel a little bit more solid than the Challengers. But yeah, I've driven them quite a bit. Hang on just a sec. Catalyst, thank you very much, man. I appreciate that. Saying, B, what would be a good set of ported heads to complement your sniper cam on a 392? The Sniper doesn't really need ported heads. So there's that. You're already not really taking advantage of all the head flow that you currently have. I don't really see opening up the heads at that level doing you a whole lot of good, especially with that cam. You got to remember you're starting out with a set of cylinder heads that, by every test that I've seen, even the 5.7 heads will flow 320 CFM. The 6.4 and Hellcat heads, although there's really, looking at them, I honestly can't really tell much of a difference between the two, but at least in testing, I've seen 330 to 340 CFM. So, I mean, you're really not going to tax the head flow with that cam and intake setup. That cam and intake setup, if you were to put it on an engine dyno, it'd be making quite a bit of power. Again, I mean, it's close to 500 horsepower to the rear wheels, making power basically everywhere. And if you back math that, if you want to try to back math that to give you like a to the crank power, you can take 500 and, divide that by, 0.85, divide 500 by 0.87. That'll give you about what it's putting down to the crank. So, somebody do that and run the numbers. I've actually never even paid enough attention to that, but that's basically about the power that it's making now. Ported heads, you might get a little something out of it. You got to remove the heads anyway. So I would say Hooper's heads. That's the one that I personally know. He's set up heads for us over and over and over and over and over again. He's got a great CNC program, and I think he picks up 20-ish CFM So gives you a little bit more of a window if you decide to hit it with the old giggle gas. But that's, I mean, for NA, I don't know. But like I say, the heads have got to come off anyway, and somebody's going to need to look at them. So that'll give you an idea. But good question, man. Thank you very much. Dr. Div saying, heads cam ACR, freaking nice. Yeah, I kind of miss that car. Love some V10 with a good set of heads. Yeah, those were ported stock castings. It didn't flow a ton. They flowed about 300-ish CFM. Bruce saying, I think a huge problem most car guys have with EV innovation is that we would be missing out on the mods we're used to on gas motors instead of just speed controllers. Well, that's not necessarily true. There's motor upgrades. There's different ways that you can tune. There's still timing that's involved with those things, and there is still some tuning. There's, in some cases, like with the Porsche Taycan and the new e-tron from Audi, there's a 2-speed automatic, so there's some transmission tuning that can take place there. Torque management, by the way, is going to be the tuning, like the tuning spot. Like that's going to be what you're going to be focusing on the most is going to be torque management, because that is in essence your big limiter for those power plants. So there's still a lot. Now, granted, yeah, no, there's not going to be, you can't put a different set of injectors on it. You're not going to be doing that. But let's say there's capacitors. I've been saying, dude, I want to try to figure out how to stick, half a dozen capacitors on that thing, and on the press of a button, it just floods it with amperage, outside of the speed controller. Like you hit a switch, hit another switch, it kills the speed controller and dumps 1.21 gigawatts into that bitch. I don't know, something like that. But you get the idea, right? I mean, there's going to be things that you'll be able to do to it. Don't let that scare you. It's just going to be different hot rodding stuff. The same way that, when you went from carburetors to fuel injection, now you've got, fuel injectors to mess with, and runner links that you can adjust, and different upper manifolds versus lower manifolds and all of that. It'll still be of the same guys. These parts will still basically do the same kind of things, but it'll just be in a different type of power plant. I just don't want folks to think, my days of modding cars are over. Well, no, they're not. They're just a little bit different. Let's see. Sam saying Lope is good, but Lope does not equal go. That is very correct. In fact, Lope can sometimes mean it's a turd. Ask me how I know. Dr. is saying, please note MMX max effort cams make more power right at peak RPM. Almost any cam setup right will be at 500 with a solid tune on a 6.4 on a dyno jet. Yeah, and the other thing is, what dyno are you testing this thing at? Not to mention, a max effort from MMX is going to be really, okay, so first of all, you have to define max effort, because max effort to me is, okay, well, I've got a 440 stroker. I've got a set of Thytec heads that Sean Hooper's already gone through and ported. It's got one of my intake manifolds. It's got one of my Doc Diff cams in it. It's got Doc Diff tuning this thing on a dyno. It's got Cook's long tube headers, 370 gears. I've got all this other, you can see where this is going, guys. Or it's got a sniper intake on it. I'm trying to spin this thing to 8,300 RPM. It's got, so when people say max effort to some guys just means, man, I just want the most cam I can get on the street. Well, I got you covered on that. And I'll be honest with you, I've seen this. The problem is that when you're around this stuff long enough, you see a few things. And when you see a few things that just don't really work, you try to stay away from that as much as possible. A lot of it has to do with lobe profile, the lobe shape, lobe separation angles, and things like that. There's just some things that flat out don't work with the Hemis. You can get away with a lot when you've got an LS type of a setup because it's a wedge head, but Hemis don't play like that. And realistically, and then the other side of it too is max effort. Okay, so I guess you're going to be running 14 or 15 to 1 compression on straight methanol. There's so many things you got to take into consideration when you're talking about max effort. When I hear max effort, it's just what's the most I can get away with on the street. And when I'm looking for power at the very top end of the spectrum, what is my tolerance for what I'm willing to give up down low, and what is the maximum RPM that I want to spin that engine to. Take all that into consideration, and that's where I came up with those cam grides. Let's see. Ryan's asking, what's the highest horsepower amount you would expect a full bolt-on Charger RT 2020 to hit? Stock about 330 on a Mustang dyno. It's pretty typical. 336, give or take. Hemi saying, evening, I just put on a fresh set of 305 35s, 20 NT Tri-5Rs, probably the last set I'll have as they're discontinued. It seems ran the old set to the hard compound layer, love the fresh rubber. So yeah, NT Tri-5Rs. It looks like they did discontinue that tire, which is a damn shame. Really good tire. I've been running that tire for my life. So, but you know, I tell you what, progress must progress. And I will tell you this, the Tri-5 R2, man, I tell you what, I'm still not in love with it from an aesthetic point of view. But man, if it doesn't work right, I mean, it just happens to work. So long term, what would I maybe think to replace it with? I'm really not sure yet. I like running drag radials on the back of my car because to me it makes it safe. Even with the size of the tire, I still wouldn't run any tire on the back of my car that isn't a drag radial. And that tire does well in the wet. So just stuff to consider. But there's some other manufacturers coming out with some stuff, so keep your eyes open. Dr. No saying, also note the Joker in the 5.7 doesn't care for the VVT on, but the high roller in the 6.4 does. Enough where we lock the Joker and not the high roller, which is a good thing to consider. Also, Pop's car looks good with those dark stars on. Very nice. Glad to hear it. He loves them, and it looks good with some meat on the back finally. I'm going to pin it and see if it will take a decent launch, then maybe bottle time. There we go. That's what that cam was originally for, so there to her. Marco's asking, what do you think about the Veraram intake for the truck? So in testing, we got nothing out of the Veraram. Damn if it doesn't look good. I will say that the Veraram, along with an electric fan setup, is probably one of my favorite intakes for the trucks if you're just running them around on the street. I've seen the snorkels and I've seen all of that. Okay, fine. But I like it. I don't look at it to try to pick up a ton of power, but they work really well. And again, if you're looking to get the most out of it, I would always suggest doing the E-fan conversion. And again, thank you, Catalyst. I appreciate it, buddy. Sovereign's back. Tuxedo saying, you kind of remind me of this car YouTuber, Raddy's Rides. He did a live chat today, and it turned out amazing. Very good. Like it. I'll check it out. Marco's saying, thoughts on Ram 1500 regular cab? Love them. They're a lot of fun. As a matter of fact, you know, Ernesto, the fellow that won the original giveaway, that's what he's got. He's got an RT, and it scoots, man. That thing runs really good. So they're a lot of fun, man. Fun truck. Sovereign saying 33 watchers, only 13 likes. Yeah, smash that like button. And if you're new, hit the subscribe button. Sovereign Knight's going to hit the button. Where to go? Here you go. Hit the button. I like it. Ryan's got a good question. Ford Star versus Bravado wheels. Which do you recommend? So, man, I tell you what, love me some Ford Stars. I have got to tell you that they are fantastic looking. They're light. They're actually lighter than the Dark Stars. Not by much, but they are lighter still. But for the price, Bravados are tough to beat. And look, if you're buying the Bravados, or let me rephrase this. If you're buying this wheel and tire setup as your track only setup, you're going to throw a set of ET Street Rs or something along those lines on the back of them, run them to the drag strip, make the passes on the car, head home, take them off, put your street stuff back on, and you know, go to work or just have your road trip set up, whatever you want to call it. You can't really beat the Bravados. One of the main reasons why you can't really beat the Bravados is the cost. I mean, those things are cheap by comparison. So I would definitely say that it is a good place to start. If you're looking to get a set of track-only wheels, Bravado's in the 18s, I think they're 18 by 10 and a half, I think. Anyway, that with a set of 305, 45, 18s, does a really good job of getting the thing to hook up. That tire will wear like iron on an NA car. And I mean, I can't say enough good things about them. If you're doing it like for a full set and you're looking to get a number out of the car, then I would say go with the Ford Stars. Callus99 saying, B, how do we get a hold of your sniper cam? You got to go through Doc Differential. So call Dr. Differential in Groves, Texas. He'll get you set up. But it's a full kit. You cannot just do the cam. And by the way, speaking of cams, let's roll this back for a minute. There is no such thing as a no spring required cam, at least in my book. It just does not exist. When folks start talking about NSR cams, one of the first things that I think of is, oh my God, this thing is probably, there's something else is getting skipped here, because the cam lobe and the cam profile and all of that, especially when you're dealing with a valve, an intake valve that's as heavy as these Hemis, you got to remember that thing is huge. You know, what is it, like a 220 something intake valve you're messing with? The thing weighs a lot. You've got to have enough spring pressure to get the thing to seat. You're going to have enough spring pressure to manage not only getting the thing to open, setting it back down, but you've got to be able to manage that at a little bit higher RPM as well. I just don't like, and plus higher lift values. So I don't like running no spring required cams. The load profile is typically a little bit lazier for that reason. And not to mention the fact you're pulling the heads off of the thing anyway. It's not that much of a stretch to put a decent set of springs in the thing. So there's that. So I would highly recommend to folks to not look at cams, just go, oh, it's an NSR grind. Look at all the power that it made. It's like, yeah, I would reserve judgment on that until I saw both of them line up next to each other. But so far as I've seen, the NSR stuff doesn't do as well in some cases as the stock cams do. So kind of a word to the wise, at least on the street anyway. Let's see. Cody's saying, until that happens, the scariest ride to me is the Trackhawk based on personal experience. The funny thing about the Trackhawk is people will look at the numbers and get impressed by the numbers, but what you fail to realize is that Trackhawk, and by default, the Hellcat Durango, but the Trackhawk will do that no matter what. That Trackhawk will do that on the street. It'll do it in the rain. It'll do it at the drag strip. It'll do it on dirt. That thing is so freaking awesome, it's not even funny. So yeah, I'm a big fan of the Trackhawk. Cody's saying there's almost no way in hell to get a Hemi to scream at 8,300 RPM. They need to talk to Ford about that. Really? You sure about that? Yeah, there is. In fact, there's a lot of them running around. So one of there's a couple of tricks out there, but one of the tricks is to take a Hellcat block, run forged internals, run different pistons, run about 13-to-1 compression with a set of CNC ported head sniper intake with a cam that will spin or allow that thing to breathe. And yeah, you'll see them up around 8,000 RPM. It's not that difficult to do at all. And you'll see them running around like that on E85. Shivnate saying, what up, Mr. R&D? Got the arm flex. I like it. Dr. Diff saying, what are your thoughts on an NT05 Nitto? I actually like the NT05 Nittos quite a bit. I don't know why they got a bad rap. And it's funny that they did, because a few things to consider or to remember. You know, the Demon came with NT05s. And Ray, I mean, I've got pictures of Ray's car with the front tires off the ground on NT05s, and that's a stock Demon, and it went 970s. So when we set and I say we very loosely because it was just me helping getting the car set up for him. It was him driving. But when we went 978 with that car, that was the only car at that time that ran that number in as delivered form. It ran the number on NT05s. So I like them. I don't know. You know, I think if that tire was available in, and I don't even know. What do y'all check it out and see if it's available in a 305, 35, 20. Because if it is, that'll definitely be the next tire that goes on the back of my car versus the Tri-5 R2, mainly from an aesthetic point of view. I'm just not in love with the Tri-5 R2, mainly because it is wide from the factory. It specs out in terms of actual width. It specs out like a smaller 315 tire would spec out. You know, there's always that slight window. You know, a 315 can be so wide or so wide, and a 305 can be so wide or so wide. That 315, or I'm sorry, that 305 in the Tri-5 R2 really is a little bit wide. And the problem is, if you've got a Challenger that has, you know, a set of replica wheels on the back, it is, I'm not joking, it's like 1/4 of an inch too wide and it's just annoying. I'll put it to you like that. Plus you get that bulge that you don't maybe necessarily want either. So, you know, I bought the tire for a specific look and performance, and when you don't get one of those two, it's like you lost half of the value of the tire, even though it's a fantastic tire in the wet. And it's good enough. I'll put it to you like this. The Tri-5 R2 is good enough to where I trust it on most street hits above 60. Like if I make a 60 hit with those tires, 9 out of 10 times it'll dead hook on the freeway. Sometimes I'll get a little bit of tire spin, but it's going to have to be because the DA is just super low. And when I was doing that filter testing for you guys, I actually was hitting it at 70. And the reason why I was hitting it at 70 was because that gave me all of 4th gear and all of 5th gear to play with. And the main reason, though, is I just didn't think it would hook at 60. It was going to disrupt the data for sure. And so it was like, I might as well just go with what I know. Plus, I had a limited amount of time that I could be making hits like that. So, because Velocicito can get a little bit hot, if you know what I mean. Bruce is asking, saying, thanks for answering. Got the arm flex, saying, I always look forward to these chats. They're among my favorite guide time activities. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate hanging out with you, buddy. Blue saying, smash that like button for you. Thank you very much, man. I appreciate that. Slash is saying, for my Scat Pack to get 1,000 horsepower, I want to do the twin turbo route as part of the equation, possibly nitrous as an option. Would the sniper cam work with that mix? Probably not. If you honestly want to go with something like that, I would say that you would be looking at a version of the high roller cam. You'd want a little bit wider lobe separation angle to help it build power on the big end. But not by much. But I would say you'd want a little bit more cam to go that high. It will get there, but it's going to require more boost. It's not like cars that have that low profile, or I should say that, you know, the lower durations can't get there. It's just you're going to be pumping it pretty heavily. Now, that being said, realistically, I mean, when you look at it in terms of the stock Hellcat cam, stock Hellcat is a 215, 230 cam, basically. And there's plenty of, I mean, look at Racer X's car. That thing makes 800 horsepower to the rear wheels with the stock Hellcat cam. So, I mean, there's ways you can definitely get there. There's just ways to do it a little bit more easily. And again, a cam with a little bit more duration is going to help you get there a little bit more easily. BB78's asking, how much should I expect to pay a shop to install cam springs, push rods, lifters, and long tubes? Give Dr. Differential a shout. His number is 409-553-0759. Again, for all of your Mopar and or other brand performance needs, call Doc Differential and Speed. 409-553-0759. Okay, we're saying I have the bravado with the MT ET Street Rs. I love them and have the NT05 on them. It's a good tire, but I will buy MT from now on. Look, man, I'll tell you this. Once you go MT ET Street Rs, or if you're doing a drag-only setup, once you go Hoosier DBRs, you're going to have a hell of a hard time going back to a more conventional drag radial setup. I'll tell you that when you have the, one of the diesels just went by. When you have a, just how forgiving a set of ET Street Rs is, or a set of DBRs is, even more so than the ET Street Rs. When you start talking about just how forgiving and how good of a tire those are, I mean, even with marginally well-prepped track, that DBR will dead hook, and so will the ET Street R. Yeah, it's tough to go back to a more traditionally patterned tire once you've gone with a more slick type pattern tire for the drag strip. Ryan's asking, do you have a website or an Instagram page? I don't. I really don't mess with Instagram too much. Again, the reason why is, yeah, I've had guys hitting me up at like all hours of the night, you know, waking me up in the middle of the night, asking questions about their car. And unfortunately, I got to get some sleep. So, but no, I don't have another website. Just run everything out of the channel, man. Tuxedo saying, I'm not just a good driver or car lover since I'm 15. I'm also an artist. I mean, what I mean by that, wait, hold on. What I mean by being an artist, I mean, I love being a character designer and a comic strip illustrator. Oh, cool. Very cool. That's something I could never do. I could never translate my, like, I've got a great imagination, but if I try to draw something, it basically looks like I'm doing it with the back of my hand and like this. I've never been really good at. Now, technical drawings, for some reason, I can actually pull off halfway decently, but if I have something in my head, dude, I might as well be trying to headbutt the image into the paper. Oh, Dr. Div's hanging out with BB78. Cody saying, this intrigues me quite a bit about the Hemi reaching that high RPM. Oh yeah, dude. I mean, well, you got to remember that back in the day, I mean, the Hemi is what you used to get to that type of RPM. You have to remember that the Hemi is volumetrically efficient. That's where it gets its, that's where it gets all of its power production from. It's not only the fact that, you know, it's a high flowing head, but you can have a high flowing head and it not really make a lot of power. In this case, it's a volumetrically efficient head. It's a tumble port head. So it doesn't get a lot of swirl, that the air it just kind of tumbles when it comes to the port. But that's going to be true of any head design, like a Pentastar design or a Hemi design. They're all basically the same in that respect for the most part. But yeah, no, that's what you would use to get RPM out of an engine. When that big valve opens up, it's easy for that piston to drop down. There's no, the mechanical pumping losses are less. That's why it's known as being volumetrically efficient, or very highly efficient from a volumetric standpoint. Where it's not efficient is in the thermodynamic portion of this. In other words, when you have a cylinder head and you are compressing with a flat top piston into a domed combustion chamber, when the ignition lights off, the flame front has farther to go before it starts to make pressure. So there's some real goofy things that happen in real time. You can't even comprehend how fast it is. But what's funny is when you slow everything down to a snail's pace, and you can imagine it from that point of view, it really starts to make sense. And that's why wedge heads, in a lot of cases, a very well sorted, strong flowing set of wedge heads can actually give better overall performance than a set of Hemi heads. But in general, the Hemi will be significantly more efficient from a volumetric efficiency standpoint. That's why they're so great with boost, by the way. They make the compressor's life real easy. So But the Hemi design, you got to remember, the Hemi design goes back to literally the very first engines that were ever made commercially. And for any of you guys that want to just, you know, if you really can't sleep, look up the Hall Scott engines. Those were aviation engines from I think it was 1904 through 1918-ish. And this was during the era of horrible fuel quality. We're talking octane ratings of like 50. You know, this stuff just twitchy little fluid that if you compress it any at all, it would ignite. But anyway, hence the very, very low compression ratios. Kills efficiency. So because of that, they used hemispherical heads. The actual cylinder head itself was built into and cast into the cylinder sleeve, believe it or not. Overhead cam engines, actually they were gear driven, bevel shaft driven overhead cam engines. Anyway, long story short, big engine, very low RPM, but they used Hemi heads because they had the highest volumetric efficiency. They could get the most air in there at that given cylinder drop rate, and then the compression cycle would continue from there. Shift is asking, do I need a tune for your sniper cam? Oh God, yes you do. I am more worried of passing California smog star test every 2 years. No, you definitely have to have a tune for the cam. No question about that. Marco is saying, you're amazing. Got the high five. Thank you very much. Saying, have a good night, B, and boys. You too, brother. Have a good one. Bruce is asking, are there any cool Mopar concepts or ideas coming down the pipe that you know of? If not, what are some stuff you'd love for Dodge to do? No limits. Well, so yeah, there is. You know, the funny thing is that they've been teasing the CUDA now for some time. And what the CUDA's taken on a lot of different forms. And I'm not really going to get into the move from the LX platform, the current Mercedes LX platform that they're using, to you know, the Ghibli platform or the Giulia platform. Either one of those I don't think is going to actually end up being a viable switch. Last I heard, they're making the LX platform, they're just going to make some updates to it. So basically more of the same. Now, what I would like to see, what I would love to see is for the Viper to come back. And without belaying the point, I had this is 5 years ago. I had a real long, very candid conversation with one of the guys at SRT Marketing. And it was at Mecum Auto Auctions, and it was just me and this guy, and we were hanging out, and, you know, telling him, you know, I've owned 3 Vipers over the years, and they had a white Viper there. So we started talking about the Viper program in general, and one of the things we talked about in depth at that time was the Viper is going away. And I was going, ooh, you know. And he said, yeah, I mean, it is going away, and for a multitude of reasons. It's not, well, the main reason is it didn't sell, and it didn't sell for a multitude of reasons, is what I meant to say, or should have said. So what I would like to see would be basically this guy's, if you could say, vision for that car, and I would agree with it 100%. Bring the Viper back, but don't bring the Viper back as your halo car, if you will. Bring it back more like the Vet. Hellcat derived platform. Pick your PowerPoint. It doesn't matter. You could go naturally aspirated, all aluminum 392. 426, 392, at these power levels, there's really not that big of a difference. Functionally speaking, I mean, you're talking 540 versus 580 horsepower. I mean, yeah, it's 40 horsepower, but it's not even really 10% of what the thing makes. So pick your poison on the NA deal. Some type of a Hellcat derived power plant from there, but it's got to have the 8-speed automatic. Without the 8-speed automatic as an option, the car is not a viable product. You've got to remember that a full 20-something% of Corvette buyers were female, and that, if I remember correctly, the stat, and that was the big issue, is that females didn't buy Vipers. In fact, there was kind of a negative connotation associated with that car. So whereas, you know, chicks always had Barbie's Corvette, in this case, Barbie wouldn't be driving around in a Viper primarily because, well, number one, the interior of those things was pretty much garbage until the later iterations of it. But two, and more to the point, they don't have an automatic transmission. And in focus groups, the Viper just did incredibly poorly against the competition. And these are some of this is just part of the conversation that God dang, what flew up my face? This is just part of the conversation that we had, and we had, you know, it had been at least 2 hours. I mean, we're just yammering on for a good portion of the day, really. So that would be what I would be looking for. That might be a little bit pie in the sky, but the other thing that I would like to see is a return of the Warlock or the Little Red Express. I would like to see, since we're just so quick to put Hellcat engines into everything, I would like to see single cab, short wheelbase, Hellcat transmission, Hellcat drivetrain. I'm only mentioning the transmission for whatever reason. Anyway, something like that for that truck. I think that would be pretty awesome and kind of a throwback to when Dodge was kind of shirking some of the rules to make a hot rod. I always thought that was pretty cool. And they did it with the Warlock and the Little Red Express. But those would be my two that I would like to see from a performance standpoint. Cody's asking, what would you recommend for all-season tires? I would probably say I like the Pirellis as all seasons. They're not bad. You know, P0s, I just haven't had any bad luck with them. I got to tell you, though, well, no, I can't really say that because the Aturos are actually more of a summer tire. But I'll tell you this, laugh if you want, but I've had really good luck with Aturo AZ850s. I run Aturo AZ850s on the front of the Hellcat. And I mean, I buzzed that thing up to 140, 150 miles an hour a lot since I put those tires on the car, and it's stable, it works great. Somewhere floating around in my playlist, I had done a review of the AZ850s, and I'd actually gone buzzing around in a car park with them. And they did really well. So, but again, that's just because, you know, the limited amount of time that I did do the testing with them, I just had a lot of fun with them. Plus they're super cheap, but they perform relatively well. They're a Y-rated tire. And so far as I can tell, the performance would agree with that. But again, that's more of a summer tire. If you're looking for a true all season, go with something that is a known strong performer. And again, those Pirellis will fit the bill for you just fine. Boosted Hemi saying, oops, I meant 315. I think I missed something, Boosted. Doc saying at Boosted 305 3020. Probably looking at 305 3520, which would be the size that everybody goes with for their dailies on a set of replica wheels. 315 3520. That is a tire that would probably work. It would work on an 11-inch wide wheel on a Charger. I don't know. See, the thing is that, okay, this gets into that whole who's making the tire thing, because some 315 3520s are about the same size, believe it or not, as the Nitto Tri-5 R2, just in terms of width. So that kind of goes back to the whole thing where I was going, God, you know, it's a clearance thing. It's not that I don't want it to be wider. I'm not really getting more for my money. I'm buying a specific specification. I'm expecting to get that specific specification. If that makes any sense. Oh, Boost is saying they do well with 783 wheel horsepower. Nice. Twin saying diff brace for more grip. I wouldn't necessarily say it gives you more grip. It does kind of keep things a little bit more solid back there. But if you're planning on doing that, just make sure that when you get the diff brace installed, the way that I installed mine is I installed everything to the differential. And then along the way, I used the cradle bolts just more or less as guides. And what I did is I didn't, you don't want to shore up those cradle bolts. You're not just going to, you know, hit it with your electric or just wrist, you know, put a lot of wrist into it. You don't want to do that, because what'll end up happening is, I don't really have anything that I can illustrate this. Well, actually this might work. Like if you can imagine this being the front of that differential, this is the back. When you tighten that thing down, what it's going to do is it's going to drag that diff up a little bit. And you don't want to do that because it screws up your, can potentially screw up your pitting angle. Now, that being said, you've got CV joints in your stock drive shaft. And if you've got the right aftermarket drive shaft, you've got CV joints on both ends. You wouldn't think that that would be a problem, but it actually can. And that diff does move under load, and you need to be able to give it some amount of room to move up and down. You just don't want it moving back and forth. And that's really what that, or side to side, I should say lateral yaw. You don't want it to move in that direction. Up and down is just natural. That's what the diff is going to do anyway. But I can tell you that I've noticed a difference not having the diff brace in the car. Dr. Diff, thank you. Saying we confused you. We deleted a couple of irrelevant posts. We were talking about the NT05 tires on a 20. Oh, yeah. So I guess the question was, do they make a 305 3520, or do they only make a 315 3520? Because if they make a set of 305 3520s, that's going to get my attention real quick. 315, like I say, I've got a set of 315s basically on the back of the car now, even though they're not 315s. I know they're not 315s, but just the width of it. But thanks for the contribution, brother. I appreciate that. Kind of blew past there. Hang on. Frostbite saying, what up, B? Got the hang loose. I like it. SRT Bone saying, my Redeye runs 1030 to 1050. What do you recommend to get a little bit more out of it? I have Race Star wheels. Well, I would say that, to be honest with you, those are good times. You know, picking the right tire can mean all the difference in the world. Setting it up with the right pressure makes all the difference even more so. Don't really want to see you go below about 20 PSI in those tires. And really, if I'm being honest, 22 PSI is kind of my basement for those pressures. Shallow stage it a little bit and pick your DAs. It depends on the DA that you're running those numbers in. But, I mean, that falls right in lockstep with what a Redeye should run. And I'll tell you that, you know, to get any more out of it, it's just going to involve maybe a little bit more weight reduction. You know, it shouldn't be too difficult to get that car in negative DA down around the 1020 range. So, you know, take that for what it's worth. I know that my car versus a Redeye, they're very similar in terms of actual ET. So, you know, I would say, again, a little bit of weight reduction, set the tires up right, you should be in good shape. And if you're running those numbers consistently, you know what you're doing already. So just keep doing more of what you've been doing. Summer Nights firepower engines. HU37 saying, how do Hoosier drag radials, not DBRs, compare to MT ET Street Rs? They're about the same. Well, let me rephrase that. The Hoosier drag radial non-DBR is the DBR is really the only tire that I would say favorably compares with the ET Street R. They have another one, which is I can't remember the name of it now. There's so many different tires out there now. But at any rate, you can't really compare them because there's not one that's DOT legal. I mean, there's one that's DOT, but it's not I don't think that one is actually a radial. So, anyway, all of those tires, once you start getting into the compound rating, the DOT compound rating, are going to be fairly close. But you got to remember that the ET Street R really is the barometer that you're going to be testing these tires against. I can tell you that my experience really does fall more in line with the DBRs, and those DBRs have hooked when ET Street Rs wouldn't on sketchy prep on a track. And it's not necessarily the the track prep that was bad. It's like the track was, it wasn't poor prep. It was just a night where there was a ton of street cars out there, and street tires tear up track prep. So, but yeah, I mean, they're all pretty good, and none of them are really all that bad nowadays. Let's see. Oh, Alberto's saying, what are your thoughts on diesel trucks? Pretty cool. So my buddy thinks they are incredibly fast with only a tune and a delete. They can be. It just depends on how aggressive you want to get with it. But, you know, you can, the fun thing about diesels is that they will keep making power until you break something. So, you know, hell, down here, I mean, you got to remember, this is Texas after all. And, you know, we race pickup trucks, and it's not uncommon to see a 9-second Cummins diesel at the track. So, I'm not going to say you'll see one every time or every night, but, you know, certainly in the 11s, it is not uncommon for a street truck. Someone's saying the all-new, all-electric Cuda renamed to Scuda. Well, I'll tell you what, it might be one of the fastest electrics out there if they make it. And by the way, if y'all haven't seen video of the Taycan running in the quarter mile, Drag Times, I think, did a video on that car. And I think he ran it 6 times on a full charge at the track. And I want to say that he went from 100% battery down to 88%. I can tell you that I can't make 6 passes with my car and be at that level. But I think more to the point here is, as that technology starts to trickle down, as it waterfalls into more mainstream cars, keeping in mind that the Taycan and the e-tron both have a 2-speed transmission, as this technology gets better, by the way, that's a 10-second car, a mid 10-second car. You're going to see some stuff that really will, again, redefine what folks consider fast, especially when you start seeing 3, 4, 5-speed transmissions in these things. I mean, sky's the limit, and battery reserve and speed controller are the limit of those cars. Cody's saying they could always just bring back the SRT4. You know, the problem with the SRT4 is that you could never build it in today's environment and in today's economy. That car came out at just the right time. Lightweight, good power, lots of upside to hot rodding those things. And there's a group of them down here that you'll see at the drag strip. It's not uncommon to see that swarm of them hit the track together, where you've got cars in there running 12s, 10s, 9s. I mean, there's some pretty fast SRT4s. These are all street cars. This is all stuff you would have seen in like 2008, 9, 10, and 11. You know, about 10 years ago, what you'd have seen tearing things up on the street. So, cool car, by the way. Unfortunately, I just don't think they could ever make one like that again. Let's see. Slash is saying, in my 18 Scat Pack Charger, 33,000 miles, I see water dripping somewhere around the cats, also around one of the butterfly valve welds. And now by both clamps I installed it, the pipe's resonator deletes. Yeah, that's pretty common. That condensation will find its way out of pretty much any crevice in there. But yeah, mine do the same thing. All of them do. Slash is saying, I don't ever smell exhaust though. Oh yeah, no, you're not going to smell exhaust. We're talking little. What the hell is that? We're talking little pinholes. Besides, your mufflers have the little pinholes in them also. Twin said, I think the deterrence of the Viper could have been fear of death. No, actually, what's funny is that the very first Vipers had a nasty tendency to oversteer, which would mean that they would kick the rear end out a little bit too easily, especially in hard cornering. And so what they did is they made some changes to the steering geometry and made them to where they would understeer more. Well, the problem was then they went too far in that direction. They had too much understeer, and so they just simply didn't turn. I mean, screaming, and you go to turn this thing and you're damn near going to 90 degrees before you get any actual feedback out of your steering input. So when I used to do when I would do closed course track events with that car, what was funny is that I had a guy that was a more experienced racer than I was at the time, and he's like, man, just aim 3 feet inside of the apex and mat the throttle. I'm going, okay. So he was riding with me, and after me bitching up on a couple of laps, I basically started doing exactly what he said, and sure enough, the best way around the track with a second gen or first gen GTS, I should say, because really the first gen was to basically on long sweepers just keep giving it steering input until you get it about where you think it's going to be a little bit inside of the apex, and it would actually drift out right around the apex on these long sweeper left-hand and right-hand corners. So kind of weird, I will admit, but that's just the way that those cars handled. But yeah, the later ones were pussycats compared to the earlier ones. Doctor saying, sounds to me like the AC drain on the passenger side above the cat. No, what he was talking about, Doc, was the crevices and all this other crap when you start taking apart some of these cars, having the condensation drip out. But it could be that also too. So we're not saying, imagine a Hellcat engine in a 65 AC 427 Cobra. Yeah, I'd rather not. Because the reason why I say that is because I had a 472 cubic inch Ford big block in Mark III Superformance Cobra. That's when they were licensed by Shelby American as their parts supplier. And so I had one 472 Ford big block with one of my very first cams that I ever came up with, 850 HP Holly with a Victor Junior intake. And that car in fourth gear, you just roll into the throttle and it would just, God damn, that car would have been amazing with a Coyote engine in it. Something with not a lot of torque, but something that would just rev to the moon. That is what that chassis needed, but it didn't have that. It had a big block in it. So it's the only car I've ever owned that I didn't take to the drag strip. Let's see. Frostbite saying, I love my empty street R's. I've cut 1.560s in my Ram pretty consistently. Yeah, I mean, they're awesome tires. Cannot say enough good things about them. Damn, Ken 797, thank you very much. Asking, do I bracket race? Not anymore. There was a point in time when the Fun Ford Racing Series was a big deal. Again, this is dating me. This is about 150 years ago. So y'all have seen Foxy. I used to bracket race that car. Dial-in was always 1270, 1260, 1280. And, but yeah, no, it's a manual transmission car. I didn't know any better either. I was like, oh, I'm just going to bracket race it. I know about what I'm going to run in it every time. Go ahead and run it. So yeah, I was bracket racing a manual transmission Mustang. It was actually pretty fun, but I didn't really ever take it all that seriously. I just had a lot of fun with it. I made it to a couple of quarterfinals with it, but nothing really much different than that. Cody's saying, need to replace my tires soon, and I'm going to get new wheels as well. And I need something that performs well under most weather and grippy enough for 300 ponies minimum. Man, I tell you what, I mean, most weather, I'd say the G2s would probably be the tire I would look at. Saying I have Continentals, but I spin like crazy with those. Well, I mean, if you've got, a typical street tire, you can only get so much out of that. And again, thank you, Doc, for the contribution saying we confused you. Yeah. Unpronounceable Bose is saying, I'm running AZ850 315 30R22s on a Hellcat Charger. Clears fine, no rubbing on Ferrata FR4's 11-inch wide wheels. So yeah, the Charger's got more room back there, and that's one of the things that you just cannot get around, is just the physical size difference between the two cars in that wheel well. But yeah, you can definitely get more wheel in the back of a Charger than you can a Challenger, no doubt about it. Which reminds me, I've got to finish up doing some work on my wheel wells. Got a little bit more clearance out of them, so I need to finish that up. Smoking at 5 saying, I run 315/35 AZ850s on the back of my Challenger. I think they're a narrow 315, as with a 24 offset, they only barely rub the plastic line, or a heat gun cured that. Yep. Heat gun, and then moving the plastic. In fact, is my heat gun? Anyway, moving the plastic back a little bit and drilling a hole where in the plastic and just hitting it with a Christmas tree. That's what I need to do with mine, and I need to go back and dress the hole that I drilled in the metal, because it was kind of a zzz, pop type of a thing. But yeah, I mean, a heat gun and a little push pin, and you're good. It looks factory too. Let's see. Ship's asking, when you notice the car without the diff brace, how did it feel? Is it a good investment for a manual 392? Yeah, I mean, most guys, when they install it, they like them. Again, but you've got to remember that, and by the way, I was using the Performance, whatever, last year or 2 years ago, whatever that brace was. That's what I was using. So it does well, you know. Again, don't go nuts with the with the cradle bolts. Don't risk the hell out of them. Just get them a little bit snug, and then give them maybe half a turn. Don't forget your blue Loctite, by the way. Oh, and I think Performance, or Chargers for that matter, the cradle is actually threaded. If you don't have the threaded, I think that Performance now sells the little wing zerts that fit into that into that gap. It's real short, and it fit into the holes there where you can, you know, bolt them up without having to you know, get in there and do any kind of fancy stuff to get nuts to tighten up. Let's see. Oh, Smoking at 5 saying that's on a 20x11 wheel with a 24mm offset. Gotcha. Oh, Doc Diff saying, and the diff braces now have a rubber isolator between the frame and brace, and the bolts also have it. I just installed one in last week, but definitely want to have a little squish on any diff. Oh, one of the other things. So what I did differently with mine, and I'm glad you brought this up, man. I almost forgot about this. What I did with mine is I happened to have some just copper pipe. No, I went to the store and bought some, just some length of copper pipe. And I cut bushings out of that copper pipe so that I could take up any room, because my cradle, because it's got to remember, my car is an early release car. It's not only early, it's an early release car. And so my cradle is threaded, but instead of being 10mm, it's a slightly smaller bolt. So I actually cut the brass pipe to make my own insert, if you will, my own bushing. And so that actually made mine work a little bit better. So for you guys with the earlier model cars, you might want to take a look at doing that. Doc just hollering out at Frostbite. Bose is saying, opinion on AAD billet rear upper control arms, tension and toe arms, along with BMR cradle lockout for hard drag launches, as the cradle movement has been an issue. So I know about them. I'm not going to have, I don't have anything bad to say about them. I know what they work. They do a good job. What will help more is just a little bit of a change in your alignment for the rear. Now, I never really did that with mine, guys. I'll be real honest with you. My setup is still 100% stock, and it seems to be just super happy that way. That I don't really have an opinion, I guess, is where I'm trying to go with the with any of the control arms. I like the BMR lower trailing arm. Those seems to work pretty well. But what I'll tell you is that when I so if you guys go into my how-to videos, you'll see where I did a how to install the spawn kit. My beef with doing anything like that to these cars is that the aftermarket stuff, the BMR is pretty good, but the spawns were real noisy. They use that Duralin bushing as opposed to like the polyurethane, and they were very noisy. Now you've got other kits out there that are adjustable that do a little bit of everything. I would only really advise grabbing something like that if you're lowering the car. I mean, I really feel like there's not enough camber adjustment once you start lowering these cars. But that being said, you can get away with some, and the performance really won't be all that affected. You're really going for more of an aesthetic than anything else at that point. Unless you're really doing some hardcore racing, and at that point, you probably won't just be putting springs on the thing. But anyway, that's beside the point. So the BMRs did pretty well. We ran BMRs on the Demon and never really had any issues with. I mean, they did really well. But again, the Spawn, man, those things were just clickety-clackety all the time, and it drove me nuts. And that's with me, if you watch the video, not only were the spawns noisy, but I actually took bolts and got longer shanked bolts and cut them down so that they would take up more of the space in the bushing itself, and they were still noisy. So I don't know. That's just my 2 cents with that. And again, thank you, Ken. I appreciate that. Carlos is checking in saying, want a Hellcat, either Chally or Charger. However, also the fact that a boosted S550 15 and up can kill a cat. What's your opinion? What should I get? Well, okay, so a boosted S550 15 and up that's not the absolute antidote for a Hellcat. I got news for you. It's just not. It can be, but it's not just boosting that car. There are transmission upgrades, exhaust upgrades, driveline upgrades that have got to take place, oil pump gears, etc., for that car to consistently be in the 9-second zone. There's guys that do it all the time, but those guys, I'll put it like this, it's not like we don't all talk to each other. You know, most of the guys that have boosted Mustangs also have a Hellcat. You'd be surprised how many folks that do. So in saying that, what is the best way to go? Well, depends on how much money you've got to spend. Number one, you have to look at it from this point of view. The Hellcat is going to retain its value far better than the Mustang will. So long-term cost of ownership may actually be less with the Hellcat than it would be with the Mustang. Secondly, the Mustang is modified. You have to modify the hell out of a Mustang to get those kind of numbers out of it. It's not just going to do it from the factory bone stock. Now, you're mentioning a boosted S550 as though it's just a super easy and cheap endeavor. Although the entry-level price of it is significantly less, look at the cost of what it takes to put a set of axles, drive shaft, exhaust, cat back, oil pump gears, the supercharger itself, and a build of that transmission. All of those things need to take place in order to get that car to reliably make that kind of power and make those 9 and low 10-second passes a very consistent thing. I know this because I talk to the guys. I'm friends with guys with boosted Mustangs, and with all kinds of varying degrees. Some low boost cars that are just basically out there running, 1050, 1070s. Guys are super happy with them, low boost, and they just haul ass and have a ball with them. Other guys get a little bit more aggressive with them, and you'll see them in the 1050, 1030, 1020 range. And then at that point, you will probably have already spent a significant amount of money on exhaust modifications and driveline modifications, but you want to go a little bit faster, and that's when you spend a little bit extra money and you start dipping into the 9s. And at that point, if you've built it the right way, it'll be pretty reliable in the 9-second zone, not like its predecessors, which at around 650 horsepower would start to let go over time. Now, they wouldn't let go initially, but there were some concerns about durability on the onset of these cars. But hopefully that gives you a bit of an idea. Now, at Hellcat, on the other hand, bone stock, you should accidentally run a 1085 or a 1090 with that thing. And with just a little bit of work done to it, mainly in, you know, some weight reduction, a gear swap, and a tune, you'll get that thing into at least the 1030s, 1050 range. And it will go 1030s and 1050s until you are dead. And then your kids will go 1030s and 1050s until they're dead. And then their kids will go 1030s and 1050s until they die. And it will just keep running 1030s and 1050s until, I don't know, forever. The point of it is that the Hellcat comes from the factory unimaginably durable. That thing is the weight of a tank, but it's built like a tank. And I've known a ton of folks that have gone out and done hundreds and hundreds of passes on those cars, gone season after season after season after season, basically taken for granted the fact that they can just keep doing this over and over and over again with basic maintenance. And then, should you choose to get rid of the car, it's a Hellcat. Everybody wants a Hellcat. And if you've taken a look at values lately, all Hellcats are hovering somewhere between $45,000 and $50,000, and they have for a long time. Can't say the same thing about the Mustang, and trying to ditch a bunch of parts at 50 cents on the dollar is really not a lot of fun. You got to find just the right guy to take that off your hands. Just saying. Slash, thank you very much, man. I appreciate that a ton. Saying, thank you, dude. I've been listening for years now. If I do get my first 1,000 scat, it'll be because of all your do's and don'ts videos. I've learned so much. Well, thank you very much, man. I mean, hopefully I was able to help. I mean, I enjoy this. I enjoy hanging out with you. And so thank you for hanging out with me. And I appreciate the contribution, man. That's awesome. Thank you, sir. My thing, though, is, Slash, if I can impart any amount of wisdom, make sure that you're having fun with it before you start setting goals of numbers. The big issue that I've seen with guys over the years, this isn't anything new, is that when you start looking at a number and you chase a number, whether it's a number at the drag strip, number on the dyno, or what have you, a lot of guys get obsessed. They get number obsessed. They get target fixated. And if you're into riding motorcycles, you know exactly what target fixation does to you. Or if you're into, you know, shooting or anything like that, you know exactly what happens when you get target fixated. Everything else that's around you ceases to exist, and you're only looking at one thing. And the problem is that that's how you crash. Make sure you have fun with it. Build up to that point, and don't jump into it cannonball style without knowing that you will be compromising a lot of what makes that car a lot of fun to get it to that number. And I know that's me being a little bit mother henish. I know I get it that I'm kind of the Mr. Rogers of the neighborhood type when it comes to some of this stuff. But the reality is that I would rather see folks having fun at 550 horsepower, because 550 is pretty good. Ramp that up to 600 or 700, you can get there for sure. But there is a line that you cross once you get past, you know, the built short block and the boost and the everything else that it takes to get there, where the project has taken on a life of its own. Just make sure you're out there having fun and be careful with it. That's the main thing. Let's see. Cody's saying, imagine a 2JZ and a Challenger or Charger with a single turbo setup. Funny you should mention that. So one of the, not the 2JZ part of it, but Dodge was developing, and whether or not, I don't know if this project was ever greenlit finally, or if where this thing falls in line. This is another case of Dodge just not really, brotherhood of muscle. We'll hook a brother up over here and let us know what's coming. They were working on an inline six turbo primarily for use in pickup trucks, which caught my attention real quick because I'm a big fan of inline six engines. And anyway, especially inline six with a turbo is even better. So I kind of was excited, to be honest. I mean, I was more excited than I probably should have been about an inline six turbo that would be going into a truck. But then I thought, well, man, I mean, if you could, figure out a way for that to work in other scenarios, might end up being pretty cool. I mean, could you imagine a variety of that in a Viper or something like that? Who knows? The possibilities just, let your imagination run wild. So, but I guess the point of that is, you're not that far off from reality. Smoking at 5 saying, back in the early 90s, I saw a guy with a Buick Turbo V6 and a Triumph TR7, scary as hell. Actually, we had a guy down here that had taken a wrecked Grand National and basically just eviscerated, took the engine, transmission, and everything else out of it and put it in an AMX. That car freaking screamed. So not necessarily TR7 scary, but scary nonetheless. I mean, that was a mid 10-second car, and back then that was when mid 10-second cars did wheelies. Sovereign saying, gotta admit, after all these years, the 65 AC Cobra is still just as sexy as ever. Always will be. I miss mine, but it was just too big of an engine. It was a very unbalanced car. And again, Slash, thank you very much, man. I appreciate that. Yeah, Dr. Diff's hanging out with Slash saying, yeah, give him a shout. Give Jesse a shout. They'll get you taken care of. If you need to talk to Doc, just ask for Justin. Cody's saying even the RTs retain their value. So, and he's saying also, would a 309 gear and shorties help a 5.7 Charger? They will if it came with a 262 gear, and it'll make it a little bit more fun to drive if it came with a 308 with open diff. So, but yeah, I mean, the Mopars, look, the funny thing about the Dodge products, at least in the States, they retain their value extremely well. And I think one of the big reasons for that, not only is it an image thing, I'll admit to that, but they just offer up something that nobody else has. The Mustang is a Camaro and a Camaro is a Mustang in the eyes of most people. But when you talk about a Charger or you talk about a Challenger, there's a significant change in mindset that comes when you're talking about those two profiles. Primarily in that it's almost seen to be a little bit more Americana in a lot of ways. And it represents, that bigger is better mentality. It's just a little bit more boss to have something that's a little bit more boss-like, right? So, but yeah, it is true. All the Mopars seem to have good resale value. Let's see. Oh, Slash is hanging out with Doc. Kurt saying, I have a 392 Hemi in my boat with magneto, use non-resistor plugs. What do you think is best brand? I wouldn't have the first clue on that, because if you're running a 392 Hemi, that's a Gen 1 392 Hemi. Running a magneto would be pretty crazy on the street nowadays with all the RF interference. But and a non-resistor plug, I don't know. Look into NGK. They might have something for you, but I don't have a clue. Not for the old school stuff. Billy's asking, if you have a 2021 6.4 Scat, is the MDS a problem? Do you need to change the cam and rollers and shut off the solenoid? So here's the thing. When it comes to the MDS deletes on those cars, Dodge actually makes an MDS delete kit. If it's 2021, the MDS I believe would still need to be shut off in the tune, but you can still kill the MDS with those cars. So I never did like the MDS, by the way. My truck has it, and I really only notice it in the truck. Let me think about this. It's super rare when I even notice it. What's funny too is that the MDS, the programming, whatever's going on with the MDX the programming itself, there's some stuff that, you know, what we have access to on the tuning side is, I don't know, 10% of everything going on in that engine. And that's a stretch, by the way. It's probably more like 1%. But the newer operating systems seem to transform from MDS to non-MDS a lot more smoothly than they used to. So for whatever that's worth, I'm not a big fan of it still, though. And I would say that, you know, if you do decide to get a tune, that's one of the first things that they kill in those things. Donald saying, I love 390 gears. I loved them in my old truck, I'll tell you that. And I had them in the coupe also. Cody saying, Dodge interior sure makes me want to fall asleep in it. I'll tell you one thing. The Dodge interior, the Dodge truck in general, I'll say this, still talking about trucks, is really nice. It's a real nice place to hang out. The only criticism, if you own a Dodge truck, you may or may not ever notice this, but my only criticism of the Dodge truck is, well, there's two. One, it needs to have better bushings in the 4-link because they have a tendency to wheel hop. The second thing, probably more to the point, is that because it's a 4-link with coil springs and a panhard bar, they don't handle loads nearly as well as a truck with leaf springs does. I've lived through this now, owning Dodge trucks for the last 5 or 6 years. They just do not carry weight as well as their leaf spring counterparts. But man, they do ride nice. I will say that for sure. Dr. Diff saying, since it's open chat, what if we did a 5.7 block and pistons and put a Hellcat crank and rods in it? They both use the 620 rod, so I'm thinking a factory 5.7 bottom end with factory goodness. Thoughts? Yeah, so you could definitely get away with it with the crank. Pistons and rods, I mean, I don't know. Well, you couldn't do the pistons. You could probably get away with the rods, but I'm not sure of the wrist pin location on the 5.7 pistons. Either way, you can probably get away with it because you're working with basically the same stroke. I would say that for me, I would probably rather forego that and just go with an aftermarket. Well, it depends on how much money you'd want to spend. But if you're spending the money, I'd at least go with a set of Molnar rods. There's nothing wrong with the Hellcat rods, but I would say that there are better alternatives out there. And then from there, you know, a lot of folks just aren't really getting above and beyond what the 5.7 will actually manage in terms of power. So, yeah, it's tough to say. I mean, you'd probably be the better judge of that, my friend, because you're making over 800 horsepower with yours. So, but yeah, you could parts block that, or parts bend that block together pretty easily. But again, I just think if they both use the same rod, then it wouldn't be a problem for the piston, I wouldn't think, provided that the piston has the same diameter wrist pins. You'd want to have the tool steel wrist pins out of the Hellcat. I mean, it would work. And again, I mean, I don't see any reason why it wouldn't. Doc Div saying, how would you think that would work on a GT45 setup on a 5.7 setup like that with ring gap I'm sorry, with ARP head studs on a Hellcat cam with 0.32 of a gap. That's a lot of gap. So you wouldn't have to worry about ring gap on that. The Hellcat cam, so the thing with the Hellcat cam is that it's got a wide lobe separation angle. It's a positive displacement cam in its finest iteration, if you will. The reason why it's a PD cam is because when you have a positive displacement camshaft, that real wide lobe separation angle does you a few favors. Number one, it ramps up boost response with a positive displacement compressor. So it throws a lot of boost at it down low. And then the wide lobe separation angle basically gives you a torque curve that's incredibly flat for a long time. Not real peaky like you'd have with a tighter lobe separation angle, and will allow it to rev out the back end. So I don't know if I would go with a Hellcat cam necessarily unless you were really trying to drive power out the backside of that build. I like, for a turbo setup, especially for a turbo, I like stuff with 114, 115. You don't have to go that wide, but to make it a little bit easier, a little bit better boost response down low, a little bit better street manners, give you a little bit wider LSA for that. And then talking about running that on 18 pounds of boost. 18 pounds of boost isn't really the problem. GT45 will certainly cover that. I would say that, again, I think the cam selection you'd probably be better off with a tighter LSA with that. Would definitely make more mid-range power. For your son's car, since it's going to be a budget build, yes, go that route. Absolutely. The cool thing about it is that it'll spool up quick with the early opening of that exhaust valve with the wide LSA. And it'll have good boost response. It just won't make the mid-range power that you would find with something like the Enforcer cam, for example. Quig Bricks in the house. Speak of the devil. Says, "Sup, brother man, getting rid of the MDS lifters was a big proponent of my decision to pull the trigger on doing the CDO1 cam." And that's, again, a lot of folks that have been driving their cars for a while and have been around this for a while know that this isn't a Dodge thing. This is a displacement on demand issue. So whether we're talking about GM's DOD or Dodge's MDS system, both manufacturers have had issues with the cams getting rounded off, tearing up lifters and the like because of the MDS/DOD systems. So, like what Quickbird was saying, he's saying, look, it made it a lot easier of a decision to make, and made it easier to make the decision to put the cam in the car to do away with the MDS lifters because over time they can fail. Now, around 2014-ish, Magnetti Morelli made some changes to the lifters, and they ended up being a little bit more durable. But even with that, the failures were still out there. And for whatever reason, somebody tries to tell you that they'll fail, failures happen. And so, but yeah, getting rid of the MDS is always a good thing. I never did like it, honestly. The older setup was more off-putting than anything else. Let's see. Cody's checking in saying your 5.7 videos definitely help out with looking into getting a 5.7 Charger over the Mustang and the 392. Well, listen, like you said, man, I've always liked the 5.7. The 5.7 Hemi is what got me to the 392 and then into the Hellcat. I didn't jump into this with the 392. I jumped into this with my 2014 Ram. It was my work truck. So, I get it. The trucks are really what was my gateway drug back into Dodge. And I got to be honest, it's been a lot of fun for me. And, the one thing that the 5.7 always was for me was just a lot of fun. I just really enjoyed just the way that the thing drove, the way that the thing rode. And really at the time, there just wasn't another truck that drove or rode like the Dodge. And some will argue still to this day. Dr. Diff saying cheat. Yep. Oh, Slash is saying that his MDS can be jerky feeling. It's annoying. I want MDS and butterfly valves gone. I hear you, man. Shift is asking, well, I have issues with a pedal commander or pedal box for an early model 16 Scat Pack MT6. They say he's read on forums that early models act up the Uconnect software. I wonder if line lock works as well. Well, the pedal commander and the pedal box don't affect the Uconnect. I think you're thinking of the Z Automotive Taser. And in that respect, I don't know that you would. My thing, though, is that you have to remember that if you're running the Taser, just remove it. That can have and will have, in some cases, some issues with your Uconnect screen. But no, the pedal commander and the pedal box shouldn't give you any issues whatsoever. And I know that Sean E. ran a pedal commander on his manual Scat Pack and never had any issues with it. So I don't know how there would be an issue, but if there were an issue, I don't think it'd have anything to do with the Uconnect screen. Cody's saying, don't want a Challenger because I need the room in the back seat for transporting people and enough room to fit a walker or wheelchair. Understand that 100%. Billy's saying the rollers seem to be the problem on the MDS, putting flat spots in the cam. If you turn off the MDS, would it void the warranty on a 2021? Yes, it would. Anything that you do in that tune is going to void a warranty. Let's see. Dr. Diff saying, what about a Stage 1 Texas Speed Performance? I've literally got one lying around. It's a good cam. Look, I mean, if you got one lying around, I mean, you know, free 50 free is always a good deal. CFL got the thumbs up and the arm flex. I like it. Scat Pack 392 saying, hey, man, what's up? Any decent cams for our slow 392s? Yeah, I've come up with a couple of decent cam profiles for them. I would say give Dr. Differential a shout. He can get you set up. Summer Night saying, what year Dodge Challengers do not have the MDS system? It would be pre-2011, I think, is when they started it. So 2010 and older, I think, don't have MDS. Doc Div saying, I love my Ram 1500. It's fun to drive, just impractical. Well, I mean, we got your foot buried in it all the time. It will be. Well, guys, I tell you what, we are coming up on 2 hours. I got to wrap this up. I want to thank each and every one of you guys for hanging out with me tonight. Had a blast as always. So with that, I love each and every one of y'all. Could not do this without you. You got to send it. Don't bend it. Keep your shiny side up. Keep wearing your mask. If not for yourself, then for others. Be safe out there, guys. And we will catch y'all on the next one. Again, thank y'all very much. Adios.